What's up, everyone? David Young here, coming at you from the beach this week. Today is season 1, episode 7 of the STEM Heroes podcast. And on this episode, I talked to Jason McKenna of VEX Robotics. I was not familiar with VEX Robotics before this podcast, but turns out they're pretty large. After talking to them, they do really cool stuff in the robotics and STEM space, from smaller kids down in the elementary age all the way up through college. They have awesome robotics tournaments. I learned a whole lot about their world and ecosystem and how students can get more involved in STEM and take advantage of some of these really cool opportunities, especially some of these robotics competitions. I really enjoyed hearing about that, how it allows students to use some parts of their brain that they might not normally use and work together in teams and figure things out. Really fun episode. I learned a lot and enjoyed talking to Jason. I hope you will too. With no further ado, let's get into this episode number 7 with Jason. Well, welcome back to another episode of the STEM Heroes podcast. Today, I'm here with Jason McKenna of VEX. Appreciate you being here, Jason.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So why don't we just kick it off with hearing a little bit about who are you and what is VEX?
Sure. So I'm a former classroom teacher. I'm coming to you today from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where this office is. I taught for 20 years at a small school about 15 miles away from the Pittsburgh airport, so about 45 minutes away here from the office. And I taught elementary school. So I have an elementary certification, and I also have a secondary history certification. And the reason why I say that is because I have absolutely zero background in computer science and engineering. So the thing that I used to say all the time when I would talk to teachers, I'm like the guy on like the P90X infomercial that was like 450 pounds and lost all the weight and is all cut up and ripped. And if that guy can do it, anybody can do it. That's me when it comes to STEM. If I can learn how to build and program a robot, believe me when I say to you, anyone can do it. So I was around year 15 of teaching. So this is probably like around 2011 or so. I was completely and totally burned out. I was sick and tired of teaching how to diagram sentences and, how to solve one-step equations and all the rest of that stuff. And I needed a change. And at that time, I had the opportunity to become in charge of our school's enrichment program. And that was actually my first introduction to STEM and robotics. Carnegie Mellon University, of course, the famous university here in Pittsburgh, would run a summer camp every summer. It's called C-Mites. And during that summer camp, the kids would go and they would build and code robots. So when I got in charge of the enrichment program, my director of special education asked me to basically find out what the students wanted to do and then kind of create the program around that. And they all wanted to build and code robots. And I was scared out of my mind because, again, I at the time knew absolutely nothing about building and coding robots. And that idea of being a teacher and teaching something that I was that unfamiliar with at that time, that was very scary for me. And as I travel in my job here at VEX, it's a very similar disposition I see from teachers, not just here in the US, but actually all over the world. So that's how I got started. From there, I started to work part-time at Carnegie Mellon Robotics Academy during the summers. I eventually left the classroom in 2015 and started working there full-time. And that eventually led me to my current position at VEX Robotics, where I'm the vice president of global educational strategy. So the second part of your question, who is VEX? VEX, we like to say, is the largest STEM education provider in the world. Millions of students touch our robots and code our robots and use our solutions every single day. As a former teacher, one of the things I'm most proud of is with our professional development platform, we've certified over 18,000 teachers in STEM education. So we're really proud of that. We just got done with the VEX Robotics World Competition, which is the world's largest robotics competition. So the last 2 weeks in Dallas, Texas, we had over, I think, 25,000 very enthusiastic students
That's a
representing
lot.
over 70 countries descend upon Dallas, Texas for the VEX Robotics World Championship. So that was a lot of fun. So our team of products that we had from kindergarten all the way through college, that's why we say that, we're the world's largest STEM education provider.
Wow, that's very cool. How long has VEX been around?
So VEX got started in the late 90s. Our two founders, Tony and Bob, are two engineers. Bob is a mechanical engineer, Tony is an electrical engineer. And they got started, your typical startup story. They got started mentoring a high school robotics team in Tony's garage. And this is when they were doing the big, huge metal robots that they were basically building from scratch. They did that and they enjoyed it so much, they decided to start a company so that essentially they could start it full time, and that's VEX Robotics. So VEX Robotics got started again late 90s, early 2000s. It got started with the big metal competition robots. And then about 8 or 9 years ago, they developed this product right here, which is the VEX IQ system, which is the plastic-based robotic system. So if you think of like Lego bricks snapped together, That's essentially what this was. And when they developed this product, they started to see more classroom adoption, where previously in the first iteration of VEX, it was just after school, it was mostly hobbyists, tinkers, explorers, and things like that. When VEX AQ came out, they again started to see more classroom adoption. Truly from a business standpoint, they knew there was a large opportunity for classrooms in STEM. So they decided to lean into it a little bit more. And what they soon found out was that, classroom teachers do not like optionality. It's like, tell me what I'm supposed to use, show me where the curriculum is. They don't want to have to choose between 7 different coding languages and whatnot. And that's actually when we were then brought into VEX's Pittsburgh office here. And that's what we do. We develop here in my office VEX Code, which is the coding language that's used to code all these robots, all the curriculum material, all the professional development that I mentioned to you before. All that comes out of here. So essentially, once you purchase the robot, the entire solution comes with you. We try to make it as turnkey and as simple for teachers as possible.
So you're gonna have to forgive some of my ignorance because I'm not a robotics guy. I know a lot about drones.
Neither am
When
I.
when it comes down to robotics and all that. So for your stuff, it sounds like you're all around the world, but let's just say in the United States, for instance, if there's a teacher who's teaching, I do know that. Well, it sounds. I would imagine that there are some schools or states or whatever that have full-on robotics classes. So when you show up, you're doing robotics from the beginning of the class period to the end. Do you say that you see schools implementing robotics more in that way, or is it more in like a after-school club or like as a part of another science class, or how do you normally see it play out?
Yeah, that's a great question. To your point, I'm very lucky with the job app at VEX is I've actually gone to classrooms and talked to teachers and government officials and students on every continent, with the exception of Antarctica, about STEM education. And the only thing that's consistent is that none of it is consistent. So I see it in all different ways. I see people doing it every day for an entire school year, like you mentioned. I see people have it as a special class. I see people have it embedded into the regular curriculum. I see people have it in after school clubs. I see people doing it in summer camps. I see people do it on a rotation, like you have art, music, gym, robotics, and then repeat over again. So it's really being implemented in all different ways. How do I prefer to see it implemented? I love seeing it implemented into the regular school day. Because if you think about what STEM is supposed to be the authentic application of what students are learning in their regular education classes in a real world context. So that's how I really love to see STEM being implemented effectively, is when students are learning things, for example, in their science and math class, but they're then using robotics and STEM as an organizer to take that learning and then apply it in a real world context. That's how I really love to see STEM being implemented.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, maybe let's go back to your sort of teaching days in the classroom. It sounds like you got involved with some robotics while you were still there, and then you went to work for Carnegie Mellon. Back when you were teaching, were you bringing robots in the classroom at that time, or was that sort of as you were transitioning over to Carnegie Mellon?
No, so the students, like I mentioned to you, the students were like, we want to build and code robots. So to your point, I had no idea that like this was a thing. So I started looking online at different providers for robotic systems, and that's how I got started with it. But I was like one day ahead of the kids. So basically I would like build the robot at home or build a part of it at home and then go into school the next day and say, okay, students, we're going to build an arm and claw on our robot today. Where if I was doing a coding exercise, I would go in, I would try the exercise that evening, and I would go into my classroom and I'd say, okay, students, we're going to code our robot to move into a square. And to be honest with you, that was really the light bulb moment for me. Again, I'm not an engineer nor a computer scientist, but I fell in love with it because the things that I was always trying to do in my classroom for the previous 15 or 16 years that I struggled with became much easier when I used robotics as an organizer. So for example, I was a terrible teacher when it came to group work. I would put students in groups of 3. One student did everything, the other student did nothing, and the third student just caused disruptions. That's how I did group work essentially for 3. And I tried everything to eliminate that, to try to get all 3 students actually engaged and actually cooperating with whatever task I gave them, and it never worked out for me. So literally the very first robotics lesson, I tell the story in my book, the very first robotics lesson that I taught, I had all the students, they were engaged, they were having great conversations about what it was they were doing, they were on task, and I was just like, oh my goodness, I've been trying to do this for years, and now if they have a robot, it's happening. It was unbelievable. Secondarily, I tell this story a lot. I was observed by my principal one time. I was teaching a math class, and you do the follow up, after the classroom observation. He said to me, he goes, Jason, you taught an excellent class, but one of the things that we're really emphasizing this year is finding multiple solutions to the problems. And I saw that you didn't do that in your math class. You did not do anything to incentivize your students to find multiple solutions to that problem. And I said to him, my principal, I said, well, yeah, but there's only one answer. So, well, like, what do you want me to do? Like, you're telling me I'm supposed to find multiple solutions, but there's legitimately only one way to solve the problem. So, unless you give me some more robust materials, there's no way I can actually do what you're asking me to do. So we had this conversation. He's like, well, why don't you try this? It's okay, I could try that, but that's so far above what my students are capable of. They would actually have no idea how to get started. So that very first project I was telling you about, the students had to code their robot to go into a square. I had 4 different groups, and all 4 of them had a different way to do it. Some of them coded using the rotations of the wheel. Some of them coded using the actual distance, and they calculated distance and figured it out that way. There was other ways that they solved it. So it was like a 2x4 across my forehead, to be honest with you. I could not believe what I was actually seeing in my classroom. And that was, again, the light bulb moment for me. And that's when I essentially fell in love with teaching STEM.
Man, that's great. As you implemented, these robots into the
Mhm.
class, what were some of the more challenging things that you found? Because I know sometimes things sound nice on paper to be like, "Oh, cool, we'll get these robots and we'll put them in the class," and either the school buys them and they don't really know what to do with them, or try to give them to the kids and the kids don't take to it or whatever. It sounded like your experience was fantastic with students go right in and stuff, but I guess maybe either what were your challenges or what were some common challenges you see when people try to.
The running joke is a lot of the stuff that we do now is due to my own PTSD when I was still in the classroom. So what were my challenges? Number one, there was no curriculum, right? So I had to make stuff up as I was doing it. So not only was I trying to learn the product, I was also then trying to honestly learn and implement and create a curriculum to be able to solve it. So not having a thorough curriculum was problem number one. Then secondarily, to the point that you mentioned about students, having an opportunity to make sure I reached all my students. So you talk about with curriculum having a low barrier of entry, a high ceiling, but also wide walls, right? To be able to attract as many different students as possible. I didn't have any of that when I first started teaching. So we worked really hard to make sure that teachers now do have that. And then there were simpler things like I used to have to shut my classroom down like the last week of school every single year because I do a kit inventory. So essentially, like how many pieces did my students
Oh, yeah.
lose? So like classroom storage, storing your kit, where to store the robots, those types of logistics, that was a big challenge when I had in the classroom. I got yelled at by my janitors every single year because I would put tape on the floor to make the course for the robots to go through. They even have to scrape it off because I would leave it up for weeks on end. They have to scrape it off, and the janitors just to lose their minds on me. So now, when you purchase a kit, there's actually a field that comes with it. So you would have to put tape on your floor to be able to do those types of things. Having that type of stuff was also something that was very challenging for me. And then just like learning the coding. So when I first got started, I used to use this programming software called Robot C, which was a text-based coding language. So I would try to create, a project, and then I would get a compiler error. And it's because it was like a 30-line project, but then on line 15, I forgot a semicolon and the whole thing didn't work. And I had to go back and try to find it. And that was a very frustrating experience because I was not interested in teaching syntax. I was interested in teaching, computer science, and computer science is not syntax. So here we developed VEX code, which the first coding language is blocks. So now you don't run into those syntax errors as you're trying to teach coding and trying to get started with that. So there were challenges when I first got started, and we work hard to try to eliminate many of those challenges.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like I've got some young boys and they've tried some of these coding, things that you can get in the mail, these boxes where you're trying to put little games and stuff like that. And yeah, you put one period in the wrong place, you forgot to throw a comma on there, jacks the whole thing up. So it's much easier to learn, I'm sure, with some block coding.
Yep,
Um,
absolutely.
let's talk about, schools want to do this stuff. I imagine that there are grants out there. How do people typically, if they're gonna go buy a bunch of robots, do people typically pay for that through grants or just from their own operations budget? Or I'm sure it varies, but what's kinda some stuff you see, like, say if someone's listening, they're like, "Oh, yeah, you know what? I wanna look into getting some of that stuff for my school." What kind of resources are out there? Do they just have to use their own
Yeah,
budget?
luckily, most schools that you go to understand the importance of STEM education. Again, kind of like what I was saying before, the reason why, obviously my principal wanted us to emphasize finding multiple solutions to problems is because that type of thinking, not just the actual rote memorization, but the application and the creativity, those types of things, that is what schools are really trying to emphasize in their classrooms every single day. And that's really the emphasis behind STEM education. What we talk about all the time is like, if your son or daughter or student does not want to become an engineer, that is great. let's say that they want to become the next great, they want to write the next great American novel or whatever it is. The problem solving, the collaboration, the critical thinking, the computational thinking, all of those things that you'll learn via STEM can really be applied in any area that you want to be able to do and whatever it is that you want to be able to pursue. We feel like that's why it's so important. And luckily, most schools do agree with that. So most schools do have budget set aside for this type. Now, to your earlier question, sometimes there's enough for an after school club, sometimes there's enough for a summer camp. Sometimes there's enough for a special, but then there's other schools. If you go to like Miami-Dade or you go to Dallas ISD or Henry County, which is right outside of Atlanta, Woodland Hills, which is right here in Pittsburgh, those students are doing coding and robotics every single day for the entire school year. So it really comes down to what the school is prioritizing and what it is that they want to be able to do. And then they make those budgetary decisions according to what it is that they're actually trying to prioritize.
And I'm mainly asking just because for our company, we focused a lot on sort of workforce education for the last 7 years since we've been around. And just now we're starting to dip our toe into the curriculum, K-12 type world. When it comes to grants and all that stuff, hear people talking, and I'm always kind of lost of like, are there like super popular grants that people are always doing? Or is it just tons of mini grants that people apply for? So just as I'm getting more familiar with the funding sources out there. I was just curious if there was like a popular grant that people apply to for robotics.
Yeah, the most popular one, to be honest with you, is the Perkins grant money, which is more geared towards high school. So that's very much geared towards CT and workforce development. There's a pool of money that comes from that that's really applicable from the federal level that's then passed down to the states that a lot of people utilize and be able to do. The ESSER funds that that came out as a result of COVID can be used to purchase robotics kits. It really in the United States differs from state to state. So in the state of Alabama, for example, they have what's called the AMSTI grant. And that grant, the teachers can apply for individually, can be used to purchase robotics. And here in Pennsylvania, we have what are called the SMART grants. They've been around for the last couple of years, and that is something that's really applied, towards robotics. So it really differs from state to state. There are some schools that get private funding. So Clear Creek Independent School District, which is in Texas, they did a lot of private donations from local companies to be
Interesting.
able to fund the robotics program. In terms of workforce development, like you mentioned before, there's a very shallow talent pool right now that there's a lot of different companies fighting for. So companies are very much interested. So if Hyundai was to build a factory here
Yeah.
right down the road, or with the CHIP Acts that Congress passed about a year ago now, if someone's going to build some type of manufacturing or chips facility right down the road, whomever is putting in that company is going to be very much interested in making sure that they have a sustainable workforce over the course of the next, 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years.
Yeah.
So you oftentimes see those companies investing into the local schools to try to make sure that there is a very strong pipeline from those schools.
Yeah. No, that's smart. Get some corporate partnerships. Hey, you want people to be qualified to go work for you? Give us a little bit of money and we'll make it happen. I love it. I'm curious. You mentioned that competition that sounded huge at the beginning. Tell me more about that. What's that entail and what do people do there?
Yeah, so the VEX competition, we have competitions for elementary, middle school students, which is around our plastic-based robotics platform, VEX AQ. We see students as young as, 6 and 7 years old competing in that. And then we have our also middle school, high school, and college, which is around our metal robotics system. Every year we come out with a different game. So we do the big game unveil during the VEX Robotics World Championships. And the competition season essentially begins during the summer and then runs up and through May every single year. Competitions, just like the classroom competitions, are run differently. You have some teams that are 15 students on one team. Then you have other schools that have 2 or 3 students on one team. The thing that I love about our competitions the most, and if you want more detailed information about the competition, you can just go to vexrobotics.com and you can see there's a lot of information on there. But the thing I love about the competitions the most is that when you go to this, and again, this last week, and you talk to the students, they can't wait to show you their robot, the design of their robot. They can't wait to show you their code. They can't wait to show you their engineering notebook because it's all theirs. There wasn't a teacher or a mentor or an adult that showed them how to build their drivetrain or which manipulator to choose or this intake mechanism or how to utilize the optical sensor. They chose all of that on their own. So that student agency that they have, because it's completely and totally student directed, you see that so much at the competition, and the enthusiasm that breeds out as a result of that is really such a wonderful thing to see. Every year, Bob Midlich, co-founder of VEX, we walk around and we walk through, we talk to students, and Bob, since he's an engineer, He loves pointing out things in the robot. He talks about how the students found a creative way to do this and how they manipulated that. And it's truly fascinating stuff. But the thing that I love to see, and I put out the Bob, is that look, they're all wearing the same shirt, right? Because anyone that's been in the classroom long enough knows how important it is that students feel like they belong to something. I say this all the time. I coached high school football for 20 years when I taught, and I coached a lot of kids that knew they were never going to play, and they were totally fine with that because they wanted to be a part of a team. They wanted to be a part of something. And that's what I love seeing at the robotics company. You see these students and they're all wearing the same shirt. They have a team name and they just beaming with pride and again, agency about it because they belong to something. And when you ask the students, what is it they love about the robotics competition? They never say winning. I never had one group of kids that we love when I hear them say, we love being part of the team. I love the problem solving. I talked to a dad last year. He was so proud of the fact that his son lost his phone and didn't know that he lost his phone for 4 days because he was trying to solve a problem on his robot. And he was so engaged with it, he had no idea that his phone was missing for 4 days. One of the big topics in school right now is, of course, should we ban cell phones
Yeah.
because they're a distraction and they're this and they're that. But then you see the example of this student, and I see that over and over again. If we give them something that's actually engaging, we allow them to have some agency, we allow them to be collaborative, and we give them a project that's open-ended, but not so difficult that you don't know how to get started, you see these students flourish and you see the engagement be so high. The last thing I'll mention about it is the last stage of our VEX Robotics World Championship is we actually go in the dome. There's about 8,000 kids there. It's like a rock concert. They're screaming, they're yelling, and this is the finals. This is the final competition
Yeah.
going on. And then after the finals, that's when we unveil next year's game. And when we unveil next year's game, these kids absolutely lose their mind. They're going crazy. And about 4 years ago, the competition was actually in Louisville. We're walking on again with Bob, and we're walking out, and he said to me, these kids are so enthusiastic for the hundreds of hours of work they just signed up for. Hundreds of hours of work. And that hit me so hard because that's the magic, right? That's the magic that we're all looking for in our classroom. How can I find something that's fun, but also rigorous? How can I find something that the students will engage with on their own? But again, they'll also do a lot of learning. How can I find something that's collaborative? How can I find something that they'll all feel like they're involved in? And that's the beauty of the VEX Robotics competition. And that's why I love it so much every single year.
Man, that's awesome. You're making me sound, I'm like, where's the next one? I want to go. I want to go. So that's
If
awesome.
you have the chance, I would very much encourage you, if there's a local competition, to go and see for yourself because
Yeah.
it is really something to behold.
I'm curious when you said, that you announced the game and they all know what the game is. Can you give me an example? Like maybe what was the game last year? Like what are the assignments and the things that the students have to do?
Yeah, all VEX games have a common theme. So we have it's not an official game, it's more of a classroom competition with our VEX Go kit. Then we have the IQ, then we have the VRC game. In every single VEX game, you have a field. Okay. And then on that field, you're asked to do a couple different things. Your robot has to move. So you have to have a drivetrain for your robot. Your robot has to grab something, pick that thing up, and then you have to do something with that thing. So sometimes you have to place it very high on something. Sometimes you have to shoot the thing and maybe you have to hit a flag or you have to put it into a hoop. Think of like disc golf or something
Yeah.
like that. Sometimes you have to do something like that. Sometimes you have to place it in certain spots on the field. And then what that requires from both a coding and an engineering perspective is you have to build a drivetrain. Then with your drivetrain, your robot is able to move side to side or just forward and backwards, right? So you have to determine that if it's able to move side to side, that's great. That means you can move faster, but that also means you can get bumped easier. So there's trade-offs in that, right? If you have to actually be able to lift something, what is the center of gravity in your drivetrain? Because now when you lift it up, the center of gravity is going to change. You don't want your robot to tip over. What's the manipulator that you're going to put on your robot so you can grab some? And the difference is as you go from elementary to the metal robotic system is number one, the field gets larger. The objects that you have to grab get larger and more odd shapes. So for last year's game, for the metal robots, I don't even know. I'm not a geometry person, I'm not a math person, but there was like a term for basically you look like a disfigured football. What it
Okay.
looked like. So now you have to be able to design a manipulator that can grab that thing as opposed to like a simple square like you had with the plastic robots.
And you'll show the students, like, when you announce the game, you're like, "Hey, this is the thing that you're gonna have to figure out how to pick up."
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, we go through all the game rules, we go through all the different elements of basically, there's like a 3-minute video that we create that explains everything about the game and the different rules and
so
whatnot.
I bet their wheels start turning when they're watching this going, "Oh, how am I gonna
Yeah,
go?"
they all what they do so what the kids are actually again, they're very smart, so what they do is they'll go and they'll figure out what aspects of the game are similar to previous years. Okay, so this game involves something where I have to shoot an object. Well, the game 4 years ago also had to shoot an object. So now I'm gonna go on YouTube and I'm gonna watch the robots that won the competition 4 years ago, and I'm gonna see what their intake was. I'm gonna see what they used to actually and they're doing that literally right now as we're recording this podcast. That's what they're doing in preparation for this year's game, yeah.
So, it involves them actually designing the hardware components of it, building it, and then actually doing all the coding to actually carry out those tasks that they have to do on the
Yeah,
field.
each game has an autonomous portion and a driver control portion. So
Okay.
the first, I think, 90 seconds is autonomous where it's all code, and then they actually get to drive the robot, yeah.
Okay. The stuff they're using, are they, like, designing, like, radio communication components, or is that more just kinda like
No,
floating along?
that's all built by us. We take care of
Okay.
all.
So then how do you determine a winner? Is it like a time-based thing, or is it like a scoring based on
Yeah,
who maybe
the matches are time-based and depending upon, how many objects you place there or how many things you're able to collect, then you have a score that goes on to. We work with a nonprofit, which is the Robotics Education Competition Foundation, and they actually run the competition. So they're the ones that supply the referees. Our thing is that we're not battle bots, right? So like if one robot is just trying to smash another robot, that's against the rules, right?
Yeah. Are they on the robots are on the field at the same time?
Yeah, so that's actually a fascinating part about it. So, like in VEX IQ, for example, it's 2 versus 2. So it'd be like me and someone else against you, and we're working together on that, right? Now for VRC, it's the same thing, but you have what are called alliances. So what's fascinating about this at Worlds is like if you win if you have the highest score from the preliminaries, then X amount of teams go to the final. If you're the number one seed going into the finals, you get to pick your alliance partner. So one aspect of the game is scouting. So you go, not only are you engaged with your own robot, but you go watch other matches. And the reason why you're doing that is you're trying to find another team that complements your robot. So you can work together to get the highest scores you possibly can. You're scouting. So now I'm the number one seed. I see who else made it. I want to pick this team to be my alliance partner. But it's VEX Worlds. So my team is from Pittsburgh. My alliance partner could be from Mexico, or it could be from Europe, or it could be from Vietnam. And we
Yeah.
don't speak the same language. Now, what you see is these students have whiteboards in which they're working together to whiteboard their strategy out together and overcoming the language barrier so they can effectively work together in order to be able to succeed with whatever their strategy. If you get the opportunity, you need to go and really kind of witness this firsthand. And if you've been in a classroom for any amount of time, the things that you will see will really blow your mind.
Wow, that's really cool. I love that, man. So they're in May?
April, early
You're
May is the World Championships every year. We have the dates for next year, but it's around that time
Yeah,
frame.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. Kinda leads me to the next question I had thought of was like, what is the coolest thing, at least that you can remember, that you've seen a student or group of students do or accomplish with a robot where you just kinda is there anything that just blew you away? Like, I cannot believe they came up with that.
Kind of tangentially related to that, but so Bob and Tony did a great job. So I tell them, I joke with them, I tell them, it's really frustrating that 2 engineers have done such a great job in the actual education space. The most prestigious award that's given out at the World Championship is not the winner of the actual competition, but it's called the Excellence Award. So the Excellence Award, you have to do a bunch of different things to qualify for it. So the Excellence Award winner for the high school came from St. Vrain, which is a school right outside of Denver. It's a fantastic school. They do a lot of fantastic things there. One of the things that they do, which is one of the reasons why their team won the Excellence Award, besides having a great robot, is their high school team actually mentors the robotics team at the elementary school. So you have a high school team going and traveling to the elementary schools and working with and helping students at the elementary school be successful with their robotics program. And when I see things like that, that's the coolest thing that I see. It's students helping other students in that capacity. in that way, and then building that community, that's really what I love to see. And that's the cool. And again, I'm biased. I'm not an engineer. I'm a former classroom teacher, but
Yeah.
again, that's what I love to see. It's that community and that's that collaboration amongst the students.
Wow, that's awesome. So when you say, there's the high schoolers, the middle schoolers, it sounds like there's everything from elementary to college, right? Maybe just the distinction between middle school and high school, maybe elementary. What do you see as the differences of what they're doing in robotics as far as like what their sort of capabilities are and the kind of things that they work on? It's like, hey, when you're at the middle school level, you're kind of focused on this. And then when you're at the high school level, they're doing more of this type of work or it gets more complicated in these ways.
So we do have one division, VEX U, which is college teams. Certain colleges all over the world have VEX teams. The biggest difference you see there is they're allowed to 3D print their own parts.
Oh, okay.
So you're not allowed to do that in the high school, middle school, elementary divisions, but they're allowed to 3D print their own parts. So you see some really cool things there in which they, create these parts to add to the robots, which are some really, really cool aspects there. The biggest difference, in my opinion, that you see as you get a little bit older is the more complexity you have in coding, to be honest with you. So when you get to at the high school level, there's this concept of odometry, which is the robot has to know where it is on the field at all times autonomously. So it does that via sensor. So if you think about, and if you think about the example of autonomous vehicles, right? So when they first did the DARPA challenge, I don't know, 20 years ago, all those robots, all those cars did dead reckoning, right? In which, it just went on a very specific path that was hard coded into the robot. But how do we quote unquote make it smarter? So how is the robot able to avoid obstacles? How does it know when to stop? How does it know when to turn? All of that stuff into the self-driving vehicles. Well, that's referred to as odometry. That's what you see the students doing with their autonomous code as you get into upper middle school and the high school students, in which the robot, based upon the sensors, knows where it is on the field at all times and is able to then intelligently make decisions based upon where it is on the field. So I know that I'm here. So as a result of that, I'm going to go pick up this piece. I'm going to go put it over there. I'm not going to pick up this piece because this piece I'll actually get a higher score on. I can tell the difference. Now I'm going to go grab that one and I'm going to go over there. And the robot is able to know where it's at all times. They develop these very sophisticated algorithms called PID algorithms. So there's a lot of, very sophisticated computer science that goes into it at the high school and upper middle school level. And that's probably the biggest difference that I
Yeah.
see.
Are they using the block coding that you mentioned still, or are they
No, they're
moving
using like
more
Python
like
and C++.
Python?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What age level do you see students typically switch from like a block coding to using something like Python?
It's not consistent. You have some elementary kids using text-based coding, and then you also have some high school kids using block-based coding. So there's not a specific transition that I see when students are like, okay, I've gone from blocks to text. If they are able to, first of all, build a robot with the sensors that requires them from a complexity and from a robustness standpoint to transition from block to text, that's when they do that. But that's entirely based upon them and what they're doing. It's not really consistent across multiple teams, so to speak.
Yeah, very cool. This is a kind of off the wall question. Is there a question that you thought I might ask you that I have not asked that you would like to talk about?
The number one thing I would like to talk about, the biggest lesson that I've learned, so to speak, leaving the classroom and coming into this space, and what I wish I would have known when I was in the classroom at the time, it's just that, we're talking about all this really cool stuff about, robots doing some cool things and what the students can do with it and all those other types of things. But at the end of the day, that's not the point. The most important thing is the process. So one of the questions I get all the time from teachers is that, well, what if I don't complete this activity? Or what if my students don't perform well in the game? Or, this type of other thing. And we're so conditioned to think as teachers to think that the end goal is always the main thing, but it's not, right? We're so conditioned to think that I have to cover this much amount of content so my students are then prepared to take this exam at this particular time. For instance, I have to make sure I go from here to here. They then carry that same disposition to STEM and to robotics, and that's just simply not the case. Embrace failure. The robot doesn't work as I expected to work. Great. That's a great opportunity to learn. I can't figure out, I'm trying to code my robot to do this, and it doesn't do what I expect it to do. That's fantastic. That's wonderful. We spend a lot of time trying to create articles in our VEX library about how to use the optical sensor and how to code your robot to do this and do that. And we obviously still get questions from teachers about hey, this sensor isn't working as I expected, and this motor's not working as I expect, all the rest of those types of things. And Of course, we want to answer those things at the best we possibly can. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is that's okay. I don't want to run away from that complexity. I want to run to it. We oftentimes end up, for lack of a better term, dumbing down things so much in our classroom. That's why we have classrooms full of students saying, when am I ever going to use this in the real world?
Yeah.
When does this ever pertain to me? Our world is STEM. It's all these things integrated together and it's complex. I want to be able to run to that and not away from that. And I was as guilty as that as anyone else when I first started doing this, where I felt like, okay, I have to cover this much amount of stuff. The expectations of my students do this or that and the other thing. I mean, none of our kids are going to get a job coding and building a VEX robot. So it's not the point. The point is the process. It's the thinking that goes into it. It's the reflection upon our own thinking. That is really what's the important thing, and not, again, that I got my robot to complete this particular task. So that's the TED talk that I would give about, really how to best approach teaching STEM in the classroom. Yeah.
That's great. Well, you answered my next question, which was going to be, what advice would you leave for people who are thinking about this? And I think that's a perfect way to.
Embrace failure. Embrace your constraints. You know what I mean? Yes, you may have a small classroom. Yes, you may not have great storage. Yes, I bet you wish you had more robots. Yes, I bet you wish you had more support from your administration. Yes, I bet you wish you had more stuff, whatever it is. All that stuff is okay. Embrace your constraints, embrace what you have right now, and just do the best with what you have. And again, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to dive in and get messy. It will all be okay. It'll all be fine.
Love it. I love it. Jason, thanks for coming on and sharing about your background story and the journey that you've had. It's really cool to see all of your experience be able to pour into what you're doing now. So if people that are if they want to get a hold of you, ask questions, or just say, hey, I see your contact info over there. I guess you guys can read it. But if you can't, we'll put it in the show notes, but I'll just read it off. It's just jason@vex.com.
That's it. jason@vex.com, my Twitter or X, whatever it's called now,
Yeah.
is at McKenna J72. You can search me on LinkedIn. I'm on that platform a bunch also. So yeah, either way.
Nice. Jason, I appreciate your time today, man.
Yeah, appreciate you. Thank you very much.